how that works. One of the challenges of this is predicting in advance exactly how many people will come. We'll probably start in 2 or 3 minutes, but I just thought I would tell people, if you haven't got the app, it's CVent, not C-event. It's just C-V-E-N-T, and just go to the App Store or the way you get apps, and look for CVent, and then you get. You don't have to log in. I mean, you just start the program and search for. I think it's 23 Interfaith Summit, or 23 G20 Interfaith Summit. I can't remember what it's called. Anyone from my staff here who knows, but you just go in and search. The reason I'm telling you that is that when you get in the program, there is a section that has that if you go to our session 1D, it has speaker, and it has. See, we're doing pretty well. We've got a lot of pictures and bios there. And usually we've got bios even if we don't have pictures. We did our best to get pictures in advance. It's very hard to do this, if any of you have done. But I just tell you, you might try and get the CVent program, because it does have, because we're not going to take a lot of time for introductions, because the information is available, but it's available on the app. So, again, you go to the App Store, CVent. They seem to have it down there. Impressive. No, actually, they may have the actual film. Let me just ask the technical people. One of the things they've done is they've done these little film clips to start the sessions, and I think they've got one. So I'm supposed to remember that. And, oh my goodness, I'm supposed to remember that we're supposed to, I think we just do the, we're supposed to do the bell or something like that. Yeah, you're going to tell us what to do. So tell us what we do. What's the... What are the startup things that we do?
First welcome, and then we'll
Okay.
We'll start. I will show you the...
Why don't we go ahead?
We have the beginning ones.
Yeah.
Now then we have the ringing of the piece.
Okay.
They will come
After that, we have the welcome address by the coordinator.
in a minute,
And then we have a small video, followed by the felicitation. And then we have your address.
Oh.
So we'll start.
Okay. We'll start. They have a lot more ceremony here than I'm used to. So it's part of the local culture, and so you have to enjoy this. So I'm going to turn it over to them, because they know what the local culture is, and I would only be guessing. So I'll turn it over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. As someone rightly said, regardless of where we live or what language we speak, a smile has the incredible power to heal everyone. Everyone smiles in the same language, and that is what brings us all together. Namaste, delegates. On behalf of the G20 Interfaith Forum, in collaboration with MIT World Peace University and the Interfaith Alliance for Safer Communities, I, Vedant Kulkarni, your host, welcomes you to this magnificent Joseph Smith Hall. This remarkable symbol symbolizes our shared commitment to the global harmony, peace, and the pursuit of peace which we all share together. May we have the honor of welcoming all our distinguished dignitaries to please grace the bell and please ring it in order to remind us of peace and unity which connects us all. Thank you so much, dignitaries. Now I invite Dr. Akshay Baheti, sir, the session coordinator, to please give us a brief introduction on our topic for today.
Thank you, Vedant. A very good afternoon to one and all present here. I welcome you all to G20 Interfaith Summit 2023, organized in partnership with Dr. Vishwanath Kar, MIT World Peace University, and the Interfaith Alliances for Safer Community. The theme for this session is social cohesion, stable societies, and religion. Understanding social cohesion is essential to address the social downsides, such as social exclusion and marginalization, where discrimination and inequality are still rampant in every corner of our society. To gain the more insight on this session and theme, I welcome the moderator of this session, Professor W. Cole Durham, Jr., President G20 Interfaith Forum Association. Welcome, sir. I also take this opportunity to welcome speakers and the panelists of this session. I welcome Asher Maos, Dean Paris Academic Center Law School. Welcome, sir. I welcome Kimberly Orr, International Legal Fellow, Religious Liberty Initiative, Notre Dame. Welcome, ma'am. I welcome Dr. Pramod Mujumdar, author and activist for Social Harmony, New Delhi. Welcome, sir. I welcome Ilyas, Secretary General of the Latin American and Caribbean Council of Religious Leaders and the Director of the Latin American and Caribbean Regional Office of Religions for Peace. Welcome, sir. I welcome Her Excellency Yuyun, Chair and Representative of Indonesia to Asian Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights. Welcome, ma'am. I welcome Professor Javier Martinez, Professor of Law, Complutense University, Madrid, Spain. Welcome, sir. Once again, on behalf of MIT World Peace University, I welcome you all. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now I request the technical team to please play the curtain-raising video on social cohesion, stable societies, and religion.
And polarization is finding optimal approaches to achieving social inclusion and social harmony. Different societies have tried different approaches with respect to this vital issue. And part of the thrust of this session is to identify what can be learned from different societies and civilizations. At the same time, conversation between different groups in the form of interfaith dialogue may open important doors. What are the practical steps that can be taken to building a culture of mutual respect in society? How should interfaith dialogue be structured to achieve maximum beneficial effect? In this session, we will discuss the need and paths of social cohesion.
Thank you, everyone. Now I request Dr. Akshay Baheti, sir, to please felicitate the moderator for this session, Professor W. Cole Durham, Jr., the President of the G20 Interfaith Forum Association. Now I request Dr. Baheti to please felicitate Mr. Honorable Asher Maos, Dean, Perez Academic Center, Law School. Thank you very much. Now I request Professor Anil Pawar sir to please felicitate Elias Szynski, the Secretary General of the Latin American and Caribbean Council of Religious Leaders. I now request Professor Anil Pawar sir to please felicitate Professor Javier Martinez Toron, Professor of Law, Complutense University of Madrid. I now request Dr. Aati Shastri ma'am to please felicitate Honorable Kimberly Orr, International Legal Fellow, Religious Liberty Initiative, Notre Dame. I now request Dr. Aati Shastri ma'am to please felicitate Her Excellency Yuyun Manyun Ningrum, Chair and Representative of Indonesia to the Asian Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights. I now request Dr. Akshay Baheti sir to please felicitate Dr. Pramod Majmudar, author and activist for social harmony, New Delhi. I now request Dr. Baheti to please felicitate Honorable Ravan Hasanov, Executive Director, Baku International Multicultural Center. A big round of applause for all of our distinguished dignitaries. I now hand over the session to our moderator, Professor W. Cole Durham Jr. And sir, we request you to please give us the introductory remarks.
So I'm not going to take a lot of time for introductory remarks, but let me just say a few things. Number one, social cohesion was chosen as a title for this panel. I think if we were in other parts of the world, we would talk about religious freedom as one of the key contributors to social cohesion. But we know that Modi has spoken in terms of social cohesion, and so we thought that would be a helpful way to approach things in this session. I'm also not going to take time to go into detail on introducing people. As I indicated a little earlier, as people speak, their bios, to the extent we have them, are showing on the screen, and you can get them on the app. So do get the app, and that will be helpful. I think one of the things I want to say is just to underscore how fundamental this session is. In many ways, as we look at things from the perspective of the G20 Interfaith Forum, we tend to focus on a lot of the sustainable development goals that have been set forth by the United Nations. And as we work on those goals, we realize that while religion is not mentioned very often in the formulation of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which I think is probably a problem since most of these goals are clearly linked and central focuses of religious communities. But I think the point is that while religious communities can contribute to many of the sustainable development goals, just think about, I'm not going to name all of them, but eradicating poverty, healthcare, education. Now, you would think that women's rights might be a problem, and in some ways it has been, but the reality is that women rely heavily on religion globally, and while there are ways that things could be equalized better and so forth, there are profound ways in which religious organizations communicate and facilitate women's issues. Environment. I think something like 5 of the Sustainable Development Goals relate to environment in one way or another. And religious communities have had a lot to say, especially in recent years, about environment. And often they're going to be in a better position to get people to implement some things that can really make a difference. Some of the things coming out of, like the ecumenical patriarch spoke at one of our earlier sessions and emphasized the idea of living in a more economical way. I mean, the idea was to not be such a consumption-oriented society and consume less, and that is something that can go with religious values. So again, the link there between religion and environment. Well, I won't go through all 17 of the Sustainable Development Goals. Most of them have factors that can be significantly ameliorated by religion and by religious institutions. But the reality is that they will be more effective if countries have religious freedom. One of the things we know, Brian Grimm is speaking in another session right now. He's responsible for what I call the Grimm statistics. He was really the author of them at Pew, and they continue to be generated. And they show that something like 75 to 80% of the world lives in countries where there are strong restrictions on freedom of religion or belief. And one of the realities is that if on the one hand, religious communities make a tremendous contribution to the Sustainable Development Goals, and it's really naive to think that those goals, if they can be attained at all, to think that they would be attained without religious inputs just simply doesn't understand the reality of the way the world works. So there is a kind of I want to call a freedom dividend that comes if religious communities can spend their time being of service rather than fighting for their own self-protection and survival. They will be able to do many more things. It will unleash certain levels of social capital that can be applied to doing various kinds of social goods as identified by the Sustainable Development Goals and many other goods. And so that's a factor. Now what I'm trying to state here, it turns out that freedom of religion is one of the key ideas that we've had. I think of it as one of the keys, one of modernity's keys to achieving social cohesion and stability. Doesn't always work, it doesn't work perfectly, but over the past 300 years, it's worked better than anything else we know. So in a way, what I'm trying to get at is that freedom of religion or belief is linked to social cohesion. Social cohesion is critical for peace. Social inclusion is critical for peace. And that is really foundational for everything else, for all the other social things that can be done. If we don't have social cohesion, if we don't have social peace, we're going to have problems in the education sphere. We're going to have problems with women's empowerment. We're going to have problems. We do have problems with trafficking and modern forms of slavery. There isn't a ready remedy for the environment, but we'll be able to do more. So my point is that this session is really foundational for many of the other things that are going on in the G20. Now we have a really very impressive and distinguished group of people who have spent a lot of their lives working on these issues. And they'll come at it, I think, from different perspectives. And basically, the plan is to go through and let each of them take 5 to 10 minutes to talk about the issue as they see it from their perspective. I'll try to give you just a sentence or so about their background. I'm wrestling in my mind whether we should just do it in the order of the program. Maybe we just do it in the order of the program. That may make it a little bit easier to follow. So that means, Asher, you would be first. Asher is from Israel. He is someone with a lot of experience with tension in polarized societies. I've given him my own share of tension this morning. I mean, we shared tension because we're trying to figure out how to get people here with the buses. But maybe why don't I give you the first 5 to 10 minutes? Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Cole. Thank you for making me part of that forum of the group as well, and inviting me to this great place. It's my third time in India. All the third time thanks to you. But the great thing is to be here. I learned a lot in the last 2 days. And if we say Torah will come out from Zion, I believe that interfaith and the relations among religions will come out from MIT and from this Dome of Peace. I must thank God that there are brochures and conferences, and that I'm a curious person and like to read every literature that is put on my chair. Therefore, I learned that I'm international and a speaker because we were so busy that you couldn't tell me even that time. I told my wife actually the first time that I'm in the audience solely, but that's fine. Maybe you did it on purpose. Okay.
I know you well enough to know you'll be fine.
I was looking for compliments, actually. When I was thinking, the disadvantage is that I don't have a set-up presentation. The advantage is that I must talk from my heart and not from my head because I didn't prepare anything. When I was thinking about what to say, there is a promise by God, Lo yigdal avion min haaretz. God promised that there will never perish poor people upon earth. And this is strange. What kind of promise is it? Merciful God, couldn't you make all the people here rich or at least well-to-do? And this brings me, I think, to another pillar of Judaism, tikkun olam, perfecting the world or making the world better. And this is another strange thing. Didn't God make a perfect world? Are we going to improve God? And let's tell you, this is a theological question because there is a dispute in the halakha, which is Jewish law, whether a doctor is allowed to heal a person. Because when he heals a person, it means it's an insult to God. I have to improve what you did wrong. And he may do it because there's a saying in the Torah, Verapeh, Rapeh, and healing he will heal. They didn't mean what they mean, but that's the way of the Talmud. They pick up a word, and that's how they develop it. By the way, I had talks with you and with Brad. I find the Mormon theology and the Jewish theology very similar. And we didn't pick up from you. We were earlier. So what is it all about? I think that God was trying to tell us something. You are not guests in this world. You are not animals. You have a role in this world. You must, I didn't build a perfect world because I want you to do something to improve it. And that's what we are all about, and that's what the G20 Interfaith and that's what our conferences are all about. It reminds me of another issue. When God created Adam and Eve, he blessed them, be fruitful and multiply. I don't understand. God wanted a community of people. He needs the help of Adam and Eve. He couldn't create a community of people. The Talmud tells us the reason is that we all should know we have one father and one mother, and we can't say, oh, my father was greater than yours, because my father was your father. And it has another saying in the Talmud that since we had one man and one woman, each one of us must say every day, it's only for me that the world was created, because it was created for a single person. And this is not a theological and not a theoretical issue. When a witness comes to the Jewish court, he's being warned, don't dare to say speculative or hearsay evidence if you're not sure about it, because the world was created for a single person. If you destroy one single soul, it's as if you destroyed the whole world. If you save one single soul, it's as if you save the whole world. And let me tell you here one more thing. When we speak about perfecting the world, it's not perfecting the Jewish community. There is, in Judaism, there is a duty of each Jew is responsible for his Jew friend, not only for what he's doing. But here is perfecting the world. And perfecting the world is even greater than perfecting the Jewish community. There's a dispute between Rabbi Akiva, one of the greatest scholars, and Rabbi, I think it was another rabbi, and Rabbi Akiva said, the great thing is to take care about your brother. And the other scholar said, you are wrong, Akiva. This is only the first step. This is the first step of saving the whole world. Since you can't jump to the end of saving the whole world, you should start by doing things for your family, for your friends, for your community, and the optimal thing is that you do it for the whole world. And I don't know, you'll tell me when my 10 minutes are close to it. You spoke about environment. Environment is very important in Judaism. When we siege a city in the war, we are forbidden to cut fruit trees for the sake of siege. So we take the risk of losing the war, but we can't cut trees. And as I said, it was actually in India, in Hyderabad. I mentioned Honi. Honi is a known person in the Talmud. Talmud is the most sacred book after the Bible in Judaism. Honi saw a person planting a carob tree. And he asked him, what are you planting it for? He said, you know, that's fruit. We can eat it. And he said, how long does it take the fruit the tree to give fruit? He said, 70 years. So he looked at him and said, will you live 70 years? And he said, no, my grandfather was planting for me. My father was planting for my son. I'm planting for my grandson. And thereupon, we are told that Honi fell asleep. He woke up and he saw a guy cutting the carob, the fruit from the tree, and asked him, oh, you are the guy who planted it. He said, no, that was my grandfather. He passed away. So he said, what's the year? And then he realized that the angel struck upon him and he fell asleep for 70 years. And that's the story, the two things. I look for the environment and look for the future. And one more thing I would like to say is there is a saying in Psalms that God had made us a little lower than the angels. And King James in his translation just, so you can't say it like this. A man is just a little, no, you made it a little than God. So he translated it little than angels, because how can a man be a little? And he was wrong, because man is superior to angels. And it brings me to why God created an imperfect world. Because angels, they can't do anything. They don't have any bad feelings. They are just, if you are a saint, as the Talmud says, that you get much more reward if you have bad wills. Because if you are a saint, you have no inclination to do bad, then what's the point? You have to fight and do the right things. I think I'll stop here. Maybe there'll be more discussion. For not preparing the lecture, I hope I passed.
Thank you.
And by the way, I promised my wife to bring something from India, so I will.
I've got one or two extra, for which I'm very grateful. So, Elias, let me turn to you. So, Elias has a really important position with Religions for Peace. He works on these issues around Latin America. I've been able to join with him on some projects, but he is really a great leader. So we look forward to hearing a few words of wisdom from you.
Thank you very much, Cole, and thank you very much all the organizers who invited me to this forum. My first time in India. I am learning a lot, and this place is amazing, and a wonderful opportunity to understand more the culture and the religions in this country. Like everyone, Religions for Peace has the mission to promote interfaith cooperation for peace beyond the dialogue. And this, it's a wonderful opportunity also for many faith communities that they don't find their place at the level of the interfaith dialogue. Inside this room, we have very good friends. Okay, now it's better? Okay. We have here very good friends, members of many faiths, that their faiths don't accept to enter in theological dialogue with other faiths. And this is fair. Not every religion needs to enter in theological dialogue with other faiths. We need to respect this. But at the level of interfaith cooperation, we come to find a common ground that everyone can work together. In my 20 years, like Secretary General of the Latino American and Caribbean Council of Religious Leaders, I learned a lot of many faith groups that at the first moment they don't accept to sit together with other people from other faiths. I don't like to bring names here, but everyone can understand by themselves. And together, I see 20 years later that we have many new members, many new religious groups that share together our regional interreligious council. And they have a very strong commitment to interfaith cooperation. Because at the level of interfaith cooperation, we bring in the center of the table the public affairs, the common issues that we, like citizens of each society, we address together. And it's beyond our faith, it's beyond our culture, it's beyond our identity. It's because we share a citizenship in every country beyond our particular faith. Of course, for mutual respect, the basis is the right for religious freedom. We need to accept, we like people of faith, we need to be we need to recognize the important contribution that the Universal Declaration on Human Rights bring for everyone. Maybe at the first moment that the declaration issued, it was not too easy for everyone to accept the right of other people to religious freedom. But in the last 70 years, we learned a lot in every place, in every religion. Many religions also held very important meetings, summits, like example, the Council Vatican II in the case of the Catholic Church, and everyone advanced a lot to recognize the right of religious freedom for everyone. And this is the basic for a culture of mutual respect. I learned today a new word, diapraxis. I need to recognize that it's the first time that I used this word. But I think it's a very interesting word because allow to everyone to participate at interfaith relations. Sometimes interreligious dialogue, it's at the level of leaders. Leaders dialogue among them about sometimes theological issues. It's not at the ground, at the root ground. But diapraxis allow to everyone, all the fellow, all the people of all religion, to find ways to collaborate each other. Example, if we live in countries in Latin America, also here, that we have the tragic situation that people, and not only in our countries, also in Europe, in US, you find more and more homeless people on the street. Sharing together meals with these people, it's beyond our particular faith. I look, example, the youth people from many faiths organizing themselves in many places to bring hot meals to people in the street. And this is an example of diapraxis, an easy example how we come from the dialogue, we come from the mutual recognizing of each faith to a praxis of the dialogue. And I see that the people take this very like an urgent mission. Professor Asher talked a few minutes ago about environment. Environment is also an issue that link many peoples around the world because we have, of course, a sharing concern about climate change and other environment problems. I can bring maybe later in a second round example of in Latin America how we work together to advance interreligious cooperation. But I like also to share something in addition. We see more and more in our countries in Latin America, we hear from the policy makers that they say, we need to learn from you, religious leaders, how you can work together. Because we see more and more political polarization in our countries. It's a tragedy because we have so big problems to overcome in our countries. And we don't understand this political polarization. But this is the reality in most of our countries in Latin America and the Caribbean, and maybe in other regions around the world. And we met the president, the members of the Congress in our countries. One thing that we hear in every country, in every place, please learn us how you can work together. Because they understand that we have a long history of religious conflict. This is one side of the history that we can't delay. But they look, there's examples like today, like in this forum. People from many faiths, we share common concerns. And we look more and more how the policymakers like to learn from our example also to build social cohesion like basis for public policies in our countries. I think for my opening it's fine.
Great.
Thank you again.
So now notice it's the order of the program, but there's also something else going on here. We started out with some passages from a particular religious tradition that relate to specific issues. Then we have someone who's a leader in Latin America on interfaith issues, and he's telling us to push beyond. So, yeah, it's an accident. We started with two Jewish figures, but that's an old religion, you know, and it's been around, and we have to learn a lot from it. But he also stressed diapraxis, which is actually one of my favorite words. There's so much talk in interfaith circles about dialogue, and it's all well and good to have talk together, but finding ways to get together and work is even better. Now I want to turn to Javier Martinez-Terron, who I think of as one of the great comparative scholars on religious liberty. He and I met on a plane going to Georgia. It was a funny experience. We thought chickens were going to fall out of the barriers on top of our heads. We won't go into that, but we have a long history. But I know that he sees these issues in a profound way, so let me give you the next bite at the apple.
Thank you very much, Cole, for your kind words, and especially thank you for having me here. This is actually a very impressive event you have gathered here with the rest of the organization, so my congratulations to you and to the rest of the organizers for what you have achieved here. I feel a privilege to be in India. Always that when I come here, I'm perfectly aware that this is a land that has been the cradle. This doesn't work well, okay. this is a delicate balance we were trying to achieve here. Um, this is a cradle of some of the oldest and richest cultures in the world, and I'm always surprised and overwhelmed by the very warm sense of hospitality you have here. So you feel a foreigner to feel like at home, and I'm very grateful for that. I have the good luck of not representing anyone myself, so I'm here on my capacity of as a legal scholar. I don't represent any religious group, any religious tradition, any institution, not even mine, I mean my university. And that gives me a lot of freedom of speech. And this is precisely the topic of my presentation today. Being a legal scholar, is logical that I choose a legal topic: conflicts between freedom of speech and freedom of religion. When we look at social cohesion, a lawyer's mind always tries to find like the problematic part of reality. And we look at social cohesion, we immediately look at the enemy of social cohesion, which is social division. And one of the most divisive forces in society is offense. People that offend others. When you offend someone, you treat someone else as an inferior person, sometimes even a non-person. And on the other hand, the offended person find it very difficult to feel any kind of empathy or sympathy for the offender. So it's a sort of distancing that it's raising between people and a feeling of mutual distrust. The situation becomes more serious when offense becomes public. That's the issue with public speech. We find very often in many countries around the world, probably India is not an exception, my own country, Spain, is definitely not an exception, when people develop an anti-religious discourse, or sometimes religious people that develop an anti-atheistic discourse. So the feeling of offense might go in different directions. And that raises an issue of conflict between two fundamental rights. On the one hand, freedom of expression or freedom of speech, which is we consider to be, with all good reason, one of the fundamental freedoms, one of the pillars of democracies. But there is another pillar of democracy, which is religious freedom. So the freedom of people to have the capability of practicing their religion with naturality, with ease, not being insulted or stigmatized by other people, etc. And sometimes public speech is not necessarily an articulated, rational discourse. Sometimes can be a symbolic speech. For instance, this summer, one of the issues that have attracted a lot of attention in Europe has been the burning of the Quran in some European cities, especially in Scandinavia. What do we do with that? How we cross the line, or this is just an offensive way of expressing yourself? There are many uncertainties in the West about these issues. And this is one of the tricky things with these conflicts between freedom of expression and freedom of religion. We cannot find a uniform position in Western countries. I speak about Western countries because this is the reality I know better. We hold different positions. In some countries, you find a more individualistic perspective of freedom of speech, so you are free to say whatever you want to say. In other countries, they value more the idea of social harmony or public morals. It's a sort of legitimate limitations on individual speech. And that creates like a very diversified panorama of legal solutions. There is, however, a red line that we assume that nobody can cross, which is hate speech. I think that it was the Catholic bishop this morning who was talking about hate speech a few minutes ago in the plenary session. And that is incitation to violence, to hatred, hostility, or discrimination against other people on the ground of their religion or their belief. Of course, on other grounds, but we are interested here about religion or belief grounds. Again, the tricky thing with hate speech, we all assume, oh, hate speech is very bad. But when it comes to the little details of this speech is actually hate speech, or is it just... So the problem is, it's an interesting concept, but we apply it in different ways. And I turn back to my example a few minutes ago. Is the burning of Quran hate speech against Muslims in Europe? Because by this symbolic gesture, we are transmitting or conveying the message that Muslim people are radical, unacceptable people in our continent, and either they change or we cannot accept it. Or is just a symbolic way of saying, well, look, the Quran contains some principles that is difficult for us to accept in Western democracies. So we can look at these symbolic gestures in different ways. And so but the same we could say about other real examples. Some people that have presented the Bible, the sacred book of Jews and Christians, is, I quote almost literally, that was a Pope singer in Poland a couple of years ago, describing the Bible as a crazy book that was written by people who were drunk or wasted. That was the literal words of these. Or some people has depicted Prophet Muhammad as a sort of pedophile because of the third of his wife that was a minor person when he married her. Or they have described Jesus Christ in a theater play as a mentally retarded person. So what kind of discourse is permissible or not? And now I want to suggest a few points for discussion or for reflection. One, we make very often in the West the profound mistake of looking at these issues from the exclusive perspective of the law, if they were just legal issues. These are complicated phenomena. We cannot solve those issues just by taking them to the courts, by declaring you are the winner, you are the loser, because this often does not solve the problem. On the opposite, it exacerbates the problem, because the loser party often feeds a sort of sentiment of rancor. We should pay, I think, in the West, more attention to promoting, by positive means, a culture of respect and tolerance, especially through education. Education understood in the broadest possible sense. I mean, not only the school system, of course also the school system, but the language used by politicians, the language used by intellectuals, the language used by celebrities, by people in the sports. This is something very important. There are people that are listened by the population. These people have a huge responsibility about using a language of respect and tolerance. And I use those two terms on purpose, respect and tolerance. There is a tendency in the West to despise the term tolerance in favor of the term respect. We think, well, tolerance is not sufficient. I think we need both terms, because using both terms forces us to distinguish between ideas and people. People deserve respect in their choices, in their free choices. Ideas, we don't necessarily have to respect them. We just need to tolerate them when we profoundly disagree from those ideas. But we still have to respect the freedom of those people to have their own ideas that may be very different from our own ideas. A third point, and that's, I want to be very clear about this, violence is never the response, the legitimate response against abusive anti-religious speech. It creates a spiral of violence. When we use violence, we beget more violence in the future. And my fourth point is, and with this I finish, we should not invent pseudo-offenses. One of the phenomena we are experiencing, not only in this area, in Western countries, is that more and more people present themselves as victims of whatever. And because sometimes they get a huge benefit out of this self-presentation of victims. When we find people preaching their religion, teaching their religion, practicing a religion that is different from the majority religion of a certain country, this is not necessarily an insult or an attack to the majority religion of that particular country. This is just a different way of carrying on with their own lives, and we have to respect that. We should not confuse critique or divergence in beliefs with attack or insults on the religion you deeply hold as the true religion. Diversity is not bad per se. What is really bad is not respecting diversity. Assuming that diversity is bad is the very bad thing. Thank you for your patience.
This is very helpful because Javier has really pointed out an area of real conflict where we need to work on social cohesion, and it's really at a very fundamental level. I think it's worth pointing out that religious speech and other forms of speech are, freedom of speech and freedom of religion often align and overlap, but there are these areas of tension, and we have to think about. And one of the things we're really trying to do in these sessions is to think about what are the priority issues that we've got to really work on for the future. In candor, we're not going to change a lot of the communique next week in New Delhi. It was done in April. That's how it is. That's how this works. But this is a really important opportunity for us to contribute to sort of public thinking, publicity of these issues, and as we go forward to Brazil, Africa, these are going to be live, ongoing issues. So that's very important. Now let's turn from Javier, South Africa. These are going to be live, ongoing issues. So that's very important. Now let's turn from Javier to Kimberly Orr, who's a young scholar at Notre Dame at this point. So why don't you share your perspectives? Yeah.
First, I'd like to thank again the organizers and Professor Kolder for the invitation to be here. I find this space to be incredibly profound and an inspiring place to have these discussions, and also aspirational in what I hope that we can achieve in the world. I don't believe that we can talk about social cohesion without talking about issues of migration and forced displacement. We know, according to UNHCR, that we're at a time of there's the most displaced people of all time, with about 110 million people displaced by the end of 2022. And these numbers are only growing at an exponential rate. We know that due to climate change and conflict, that with climate change alone, that the World Bank has projected that there will be about 250 million people displaced by 2050. And climate change exacerbates conflict and other forms of social unrest that can lead to issues such as religious persecution. And so no country or space is going to be able to be immune from massive amounts of forced displacement. Unfortunately, in the international sphere, asylum and refugee law is quite limited and has not changed since its initial definition in 1951, the Refugee Convention. Additionally, those who have signed on to that convention, which is most of the world, they are not living up to those obligations and practicing a lot of externalization and trying and not taking part in their role in bringing in forcibly displaced people. And that is having significant impacts on social cohesion, because whether or not governments want to accept forcibly displaced persons, they're coming nonetheless. For so many reasons outside of their control, which leaves them incredibly vulnerable. And the religious belief of a person acts oftentimes is an exacerbating vulnerability amongst the already vulnerable. So we know, for example, the Rohingya who've been displaced in mass into Bangladesh, they've been displaced as a result of their religious persecution, and then they continue to be persecuted in what should be their areas of refuge. They've face extremely challenging conditions, including escalating violence and the recent closure of schools. The Bangladeshi government has relocated some of the refugees, including Rohingya Christians, to the island of Bashan Char, which leads them to be exposed to even worse environmental risks. The same happens as many people are not relocated to refugee camps, but instead are moving from rural to urban communities. And in those urban communities, those tend to be already struggling communities. So you have forced displacement creating significant divisions and strains on those communities, which increase division. Forced displacement can raise housing and food prices. They intensify environmental pressures. They can strain public services such as healthcare and education, and strain service of deliveries to already strained host communities. It increases job scarcity, especially in low-skilled and low-paying jobs. However, the effects of forced displacement on host communities are not inevitable. Studies show that they are shaped by socioeconomic context as well as humanitarian and development responses. And most importantly, the perception of the host community towards refugees and displaced persons. We know that short-term and long-term approaches, such as providing refugees the right to work, freedom of movement, access to social services, civil and birth registration, and the right to accommodation, as well as investing in infrastructure and services to meet increased demand due to population shocks, and using these investments to address existing vulnerabilities in host communities have proven to mitigate many of the negative impacts that can occur in the face of forced displacement. The World Bank has shown in camp-like contexts in Ethiopia, Kenya, and Uganda that they reveal that there's positive and significant correlation between refugee and host interaction and the perception of hosts towards refugees. And I think this is where the interfaith community can have the most significant impact. Just as Professor Javier Martinez Toron indicated, a lot of these may not be legal issues, but social. And so interfaith communities, religious groups can play a significant role in host reception and working with the government in order to prepare for what is current and impending displacement and impacts on these communities. And so faith can, in fact, not necessarily be a vulnerability, but a strength, that those living according to their faith who are willing to engage in interfaith dialogue to prepare their communities and to integrate those of different faiths into their communities will be substantially important to social cohesion as the world sees more and more people uprooted for so many issues beyond their control. And so that's where I think that the interfaith community has a significant and crucial role in outside of the legal arena to confront these major issues.
Okay, great. So now we start seeing the broader picture. I have to tell you, for the G20 Interfaith, one of our major working groups is refugees and displaced persons, because for precisely the reasons that Kimberly is talking about, and just how dramatic these situations are. I mean, she talked about the numbers now exceeding 110 million displaced persons. it's gone up from about 80 million about 5 years ago. So these numbers are huge. And the best numbers I've seen are something like 100,000 a year get replaced. So think about this, and think about camps where a lot of people spend their entire childhood, like from 0 to 20 in camps. So these are just huge problems, and a lot of the problems are being born in countries that can least bear the weight of the problems. And so the idea that you're advancing, that we can, the social cohesion problem, picking up on what Javier was saying about thinking more of, it's not just judicial resolution of these issues. I mean, I'm a lawyer too, and we look at what the European Court is doing and so on, but we look to the education. I'm looking at people working on the education panel coming up. Education is a key issue. Okay, now I want to turn now to Ravan Hassanov. He is the executive director of the Baku International Multicultural Center, and so he's looking at these issues in the context of Azerbaijan and the larger historical context of the Caucasus, of that region, difficult tensions going on in that part of the world, and sort of coming at the social cohesion problem from the perspective of multiculturalism. So, Ravan.
Thank you, Cole. First, I'm very delighted to be here in India and to greet all of you. And I extend my gratitude to the organizers for having me at this panel on social cohesion. As you mentioned, I would like to draw your attention to the importance of cultural diversity and tolerance as a significant factor contributing development of social cohesion, as well as significant sense of sharing common values. As you know, the society characterized by strong social cohesion is not just a merely collection of individuals, but it's an entity that feeds from diversity, harmony, and unity. Social cohesion is not a synonym with multiculturalism, while there is some parallels. Multiculturalism is a civic project that brings people together and generate social cohesion. And I believe that emphasizing the importance of multiculturalism in the context of social cohesion is very crucial, and there is several reasons for that. First, enrich perspective. When we interact with different people from different backgrounds, we gain a fresh insight and broaden our horizons. The second factor is exchange of experiences. This exchange enrich our cultural heritage and foster an environment where we can learn from one another history. Another factor is social unity. Embracing multiculturalism shows that we value each personal unique contribution, and it sends a message of inclusivity, which is very crucial, creating a sense of belonging. And the last factor is social harmony. Acknowledging and accepting the cultural diversity could reduce the potential of misunderstanding and conflicts. An environment of acceptance promotes harmony within the community. As we live in an ever-changing world, let us remember that creating a strong social cohesion is an ongoing process and requires commitment from all of us. To achieve this, I think we have to also promote the policy of multiculturalism by promoting education, dialogue, and inclusivity. But unfortunately, when the topic of social cohesion arises, mostly we are discussing for its absence. And we have to understand there is several factors contributing to this trend. These may include inequality, discrimination, rapid rise in migration, as mentioned here, political and ideological polarization, economical inequality, rapid rise in urbanization, etc. These all factors could be explained in details, but considering our time limit and the academic background of this auditorium, I'm not going to do this, and without taking much of your time, I would like briefly inform you about the steps taken and experience gained by Azerbaijan last 30 years after gaining the independence. Azerbaijan has experienced both period of social cohesion and tension. Azerbaijan gained independence after the collapse of Soviet Union in 1991 and faced challenges related national unity and religious conflicts. And the government did many efforts to create a national unity or diversity in this direction, but it was not very easy because Azerbaijan located in a complex geography and is rich in ethnic and religious diversity. And there was needed cultural system, there was needed a value system that could unite this diversity. But unfortunately also 20% of our territory had been occupied immediately after gaining the independence. There was many problems. In my opinion, I think that one of the most important steps taken by the president of Azerbaijan at that time was elevating the concept of multiculturalism to the state policy level. And in connection with political and legal reforms were implemented, legal systems were adapted accordingly. And today, multiculturalism in Azerbaijan is not just a concept, not a theory, but it's an important part of the state policy and an important factor of social cohesion presenting nowadays in Azerbaijan. As I mentioned before, social cohesion is a complex concept, and to achieve that needed continuous effort, and there is several factors contributing strengthening the social cohesion. Among them, one of the most important is fighting economical inequality, and that was another challenge for Azerbaijan after gaining independence: convert natural resources to human capital and to create a social justice in the society. You may surprise why I transition from the topic of multiculturalism to the economical inequality, because I believe that there is a strong relationship between these two manifestations. Multiculturalism policy lead also internal and social stability, and these reforms must go hand in hand. Dear participants, one of the important factor and important aim of my center, Baku International Multiculturalism Center, which I lead, is to learn different experiences, to learn other ideas, to exchange of ideas. And I think that today's event, G20 Interfaith Forum, one of the most important platforms where we can do this, we can exchange the ideas, and I'm very grateful, Professor Koldurham and other organizers, for inviting and having us. And maybe it looks like very utopic that to achieve the global peace, but I believe that peace also is a process, and we need to continue our effort in this direction. I would like to thank you one more time for your attention and wish success such kind of conferences.
So thank you, Ravan, and I know from experience how he's struggling to actually implement these things in his country. As we turn to Yuyun, she is in a really very interesting position. So she is Indonesia's representative to ICHR, the ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights. And I've known her for several years. And right now, in addition, because Indonesia is the chair, as I understand it, that makes her the chair of ICHR. So this is thinking of this ASEAN, which represents something like 8.5% of the world's population, thinking about how to make these things work, how to make them work in Indonesia, but also how to make them work in ASEAN, which is, and it's a very important time because you're engaging in sort of vision building for the future, which goes beyond just the FORB issues. So I think, I'm hoping you'll have the solutions for everything now in terms of all these other things. But it's sort of nice that we're coming to you at this point because your work really is looking at things like the kinds of things that Javier talked about, reflecting back to the sort of the Indosphere in terms of religious traditions, Islam, but also other Indonesian religions. So, very important. And I'm glad it's on your shoulders, because she's very good.
Thank you, Professor Cole. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I have prepared my presentation, so I just read to make the time more structured. Thank you for having me today, and I congratulate the organizer for hosting this very important event at the sideline of G20. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, interfaith dialogue help create social cohesion as it ensures that multi-faith societies are filled with empathy and understanding as opposed to animosity and fear. Interreligious dialogue or interfaith dialogue can occur in 4 levels, in my observation. At the level of knowledge, at the level of action, at the level of spirituality and morality. It doesn't mean have to be fulfill everything, but usually the event of interregional, interreligious and interfaith dialogue serve this kind of purposes. And it can also build up on the existing measures related to element of social cohesion. So for instance, sense of belonging as opposed of isolation, inclusion as opposed to exclusion, participation as opposed to non-commitment, recognition as opposed to rejection, and legitimacy as opposed to illegitimacy, which refers to institutions. It is very common that interfaith dialogue address the issue of inequality and discrimination, and also reinforce some of common values, and ensure implementation of mechanism for political participation and representation. Very often, extremism, mistrust, misconceptions, weakness, and lack of proper representation create challenges in an interfaith dialogue. It is therefore I would like to support what Professor Javier has been proposing earlier, to have the framework of tolerance, respect, and perhaps some sincere preparedness for the interfaith dialogue and also interreligious dialogue. Now I would like to shift into ASEAN. ASEAN is the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, consists of 10 member states, soon to be 11. ASEAN Charter recognizes the respect for different cultures, languages, and religions of the peoples of ASEAN, which emphasizing their common values in the spirit of unity and diversity. Article 22 of the ASEAN Human Rights Declaration also guarantees freedom of religion and belief, which provide a framework for regional cooperation to ensure religious freedom and interfaith dialogue. In this connection, ASEAN member states are expected to strengthen cooperation to promote greater understanding in building and sustaining peace, security, and prosperity in the region, and including religious as one of the topic. I also would like to highlight that in 2010, ASEAN member states were actively involved in an unanimous adoption process of the United Nations General Assembly and Resolution 65/5 on the World Interfaith Harmony Week. This resolution recognized the pressing need for dialogue among people of different faith and religions to enhance mutual rapport, affinity, and cooperation. This resolution also reaffirms that interreligious dialogue is a crucial element in culture of peace. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, in 2017, ASEAN leaders adopted the ASEAN Declaration on the Culture of Prevention for a peaceful, inclusive, resilient, healthy, and harmonious society. There has been a number of initiatives as introduced by ASEAN member states as well as ASEAN sectoral bodies on interfaith dialogue, which engage with women and also youth, and recently happened in 2023. Distinguished participants, we are living in interconnected world that we must be aware that existing and emerging threat to peace and harmony are complex due to a range of political, cultural, and social economic causes. ASEAN continues to face this kind of new threats in building an inclusive society in which all segments should be empowered with a sense of belonging and optimism in ability to enjoy benefits for development. Therefore, cognizant of new approaches are needed to handle these challenges, including in the way we tackle interfaith dialogue. We need to enhance our efforts to promote and uphold mutual understanding and respect between different cultures and religion. Only through these efforts, we can address the pressing issues brought about by intolerance such as Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, xenophobia that we are currently facing at the national, regional, and global levels. While the initiative of interfaith dialogue with the participation of religious leaders and discussing on religious issues should continue, it is also important to expand the membership of the dialogue and the topic of the dialogue, especially on the role of dialogue to explore issues beyond religion, engage actors who are working not only on religious issues, such as on developmental issues, environmental issues, climate change, technology, economic development, campaigns against child marriage, human rights, trafficking in person, prevention of torture, right to health, to name a few. In my engagement on economic justice, the main challenge for many women small business is dealing with religious teaching. As their relatives, husband, and people around them advise them to prevent to grow more business, or because that business, big business, allow them to go out the house more, which violating what their destiny as a woman. There are similar stories I face in the area of child marriage, climate change. So the role of religion, the role of religious leaders, the role of those who are not working on religion but engaging with interfaith dialogue is very, very important. Religious issues should not be inclusive. In ICHR, as mentioned by Professor Cole, is the ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights. In 2019, tried to mix and make a nexus between freedom of religion and belief and freedom of opinion and expression. In 2021, we also include the discussion of SDG whenever we talk about freedom of religion and belief. In August 2023, just recently, Indonesian government organized the ASEAN Intercultural and Interreligious Dialogue Conference in Jakarta with the goal of fostering peace and harmony through religious activism and ongoing debate between religious freedom and freedom of expression. For social cohesion, state societies and religion, there is a need to have a whole society approach in addressing the existing and emerging challenges before us. Since Professor Cole mentioned about the development of the new blueprint community building of ASEAN, which will take 20 years, so we call it as ASEAN 2045. There has been a number of discussion in this area, but I'm worried that less discussion on the issue of religion. I think the way, despite all norms available in ASEAN in relation to religious freedom, religious issues continue to be dealt in very narrow-minded approach. It is therefore there is a need to have an engagement with the task force members to establish a link between development, community building, and religion. Because at the local level, at the lower level, people always face some religious teaching as one of the hindrance in their development and development of capability. So I would like to end my presentation there, and I thank you very much.
Well, yeah, impressive. Yeah, I mean, I think again, we're going from broader and from some focused issues to very, very broad things. And for me, one of the really interesting questions that we started really having last year when the G20 was in Indonesia, but again this year, how I kept getting exposed to the notion that there may be different ways of approaching things in this part of the world, that we really ought to be listening, and I've tried to stress that a little bit as we've been in some of the earlier sessions. So that may be something that you could also share with us. This is Dr. Pramad Mujumdar, who I'm meeting for the first time, but I'm looking forward to conversation. But I think you could tell us about your experience in India, but beyond, and how we think about things that really need to be understood differently than sometimes things are understood in the West.
Thank you very much, Professor Cole. Thank you very much, Professor Cole, and thanks the organizing committee of this summit to invite me to share my views. Being a member of the host country here, I will have to draw your attention of the issue of cohesive development as well as interfaith relations in this particular part of the world. As it has been mentioned that I am a social activist and a freelance journalist being associated with the work of peace and harmony in the society for last 20-25 years. What I've experienced is that being a very rich history of cultural cohesive thought process in this country and interfaith dialogue of the years, nearly of 500 years one can say. There are different sects, different faiths, they have inter-religious, interfaith dialogue. And there is definitely a cultural cohesive development. But recently, maybe as mentioned by many of the previous speakers, because of many developmental issues of globalization, issues of economic and developmental stresses, interfaith relationship is been at stakes. At many times, it has developed into a violent incidences and polarization of the religious thought and ideological thought process. In that respect, I feel that being into a new world, we all of us are a member of the new developing world, and we have to see that democratic principles and secular viewpoints are to be part of our life and our being in this society. But what has been experienced is that because of religious and ideological polarizations, for last 10-20 years, India is undergoing stress relationship between different faiths. Even though the constitutional provisions, the human rights provisions in the legal framework are definitely progressive, the polarization of religions have resulted into tensions, and this has to be addressed by the active intervention. When I mean the polarization and the stress of violence, it is always been among the two different sects of the society, and one is a minority and one is the majority society. The society, if divided into minority and majority societies, then the tensions grow at a level and at a speed which are to be, which are unimaginable, and minorities persons and citizens face lot of stress. In this situation, we suppose that it is a role of the majority and advanced society to intervene for the harmony, develop a harmonious relationships. Our experience shows that common citizens of both the societies, of the all faiths, have a very rich wisdom, collective wisdom to have a cohesive relations. But there are certain different factors which operate, and those are to be addressed. In India, we as our team, coordination team for working for the peace and harmony, have taken up a active record of the oral history of different cultural and religious practices which are followed by the all religious citizens, all people belonging to all religions. And those are, I suppose, are the syncretic cultural practices. Those practices are visible into many places where certain religion worship places are worshipped by all religions. The best example could be Sufi tradition here, where the peers and dargahs are worshipped by all religions. They celebrate together the practices. Then there is a bhakti movement which is associated with the Hindu religion, is being practiced by all religions, and they celebrate it in big way. One has to find out these harmonial historical strengths which keep people together. And I'm sure that in India, there is a very strong ground to develop into a strong interfaith dialogue as well as spread of a harmonious and relations among the different religions. In this respect, I would like to draw your attention to the fact that the religions, all religions and faiths are a great creation of the humankind. And it has been part of the human development. But at the same time, harmony and peace are the basic pillars of this development of the human history. Because unless this had been there, the development of all world could not have taken place. So, whereas in many cases we see that histories are looked in terms of wars and violence, but I would assert that the history of the humankind is of harmony and peace. And that is the main, that has to be the main thrust of the new society. In the new society, all religions and faiths could contribute with this viewpoint to take the humanity forward. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, now we've got about 20 minutes left for discussion. I'm looking around the table, and I know there are a lot of really significant experts here in many ways. As I think about what we've heard, I mean, so in India you were talking about history, harmony, but you're also talking about how religion is a source of tension, social lack of cohesion, and I take it that's part of what Yuyun is talking about. You look at the ASEAN countries, and at one level, ASEAN to become a really effective, interactive market area needs to achieve respect. But if you know about the countries, virtually every country has a majority religion or ideology that is a minority position somewhere else. And we're seeing spillover effects refugee-wise from Myanmar in particular. That's the first things that comes to mind, and it's Muslim versus Buddhist tensions. And then I think about Latin America. I'm not quite sure what Latin America has done, but Latin America has really had these massive sociological shifts. I would say 50 years ago it was 95% Roman Catholic. Depending on the country now, it's like 65% Catholic in Brazil, probably more 50-50 in Guatemala. I mean, these are huge sociological shifts that have happened. I mean, it's hard for me to imagine that happening in this part of the world without massive communal violence. So how do you build that difference into the planning for the future? That's, I suppose, the question for it. What do you think accounts for it? Are there things that we could learn? obviously, what we need to find is keys to social cohesion. And I mean, I've increasingly been struck by this difference between Latin America, say, and ASEAN or India. And I'm not sure if, maybe from a multicultural perspective, you have, why don't I let each of you take a shot at that, and then let's open things up. But some quick responses from our panel, and then let's open it up to discussion.
I feel the situation is definitely at the moment is not as what we expect. And there has to be special efforts on the part of different faiths as well as the states to see that the perception of different social groups, minority and majority communities, are to be changed, and special efforts needs to be taken for that. In that respect, I feel at a global level as well, there could be special efforts, and for which I would suggest that writing a harmony-centric history of the world, where people for years or hundreds of years, for centuries, have understood each other, and that has been the basis of the whole humankind development. At the same time, I would suggest that this aspect of cohesive development or cohesive sustainable development, what we say, there needs to be a special focus on religious harmony as well as human rights associated with the religious harmony are to be identified, and if a charter of human rights for cohesive development can be designed, then it may promote a wider circle discussions on such issues, and we can look forward for the broader perspective on this particular issue.
Okay, I don't know if you would like to take a quick shot, and I'd love to hear what the others of you think.
Okay. Okay, Cole. Thank you for the question. From one side, we see, and maybe I have the background because I am Jewish, that the Catholicism come to be more cultural than religious especially at the level of the young generations. We see more and more young people, Catholic people, and also sometimes evangelical, that they look themselves not in terms of religion, more in terms of culture. And this, of course, this is part of the secularization that we live in the Western societies, no? Another thing that we look, that we broke the borders of ethnics and religion. What I mean, what is meaning? We see more and more example people that, I'm sorry that I talk about race, but white people, example, or people from European origin, that they have now like new religions, Afro-Brazilian religions, or indigenous religions. We held the case of one president in Guatemala that he's from Hispanic background, but his religion was the Mayan religion. Sometimes people call me, Elias, we need to invite some indigenous leader, but can't be that the indigenous spiritual leader is not more member of an indigenous ethnical background. Maybe he or she is, and I'm sorry again, I will use a race word. It's a white person, and this is a minding change very strong about the categories that on the past we think. On the other side, we have more and more the factor of the religious fundamentalism. We see, example, in Brazil, in the Congress, we have the evangelical parliamentarian group, the Catholic parliamentarian group, and sometimes this mixture between religions and politics don't bring the best result. And we need also to look how we can to keep the interfaith harmony at the same time that we need to respect the political option of the people. If also the people like to bring religions to the political arena.
So, yeah.
I think in the context of Southeast Asia, recognition is very important on different religions in different countries. But there are also a layer of some countries recognize religion but not the rest. So that's recognizing but limiting. So to be able to increase, I also would like to take the example of Rohingya. There is no recognition about their ethnicity, their identity, their religion. That's create a lot of problem in social cohesion. Even for Rohingya's case, it is institutionalized, it is structured in the law. So I think one of the entry point or one possible means is to state need to know which area that they can govern in relation to religion and which area that they cannot govern, and that kind of concept is not equally understood by member states in the region, and therefore we have number of limitation. I think some of the countries, my friends, will be able to also recognize that certain practices, religious practices, it was regulated by governments, and that's recognizing, but at the same time limiting. So that creates a problem in social cohesion.
So, Javier.
Well, what I'm going to say is I think it can be applied to anywhere in the world. I talked before about the idea of respect. And respect, we know, may be based on fear or may be based on appreciation for others. For obvious reasons, the good respect is the one based on appreciation, because the one based on fear doesn't last long. That's why I think that when we speak about social cohesion, we should try to find like what we have in common with people that are very different from us. So we very often, when we think of other people, we think of why we are different from them. Why don't we often think, what would we have in common with them? What is uniting us? Long ago I heard a story about a tribal dispute in Africa, in some African country. The people, the representatives, gathered to try to solve the problem. It was impossible, situation was worsening. And then they called a mediator, and the mediator came up with a brilliant idea. They gathered each one of the group separately, and he told them, just think of one thing, something you like of the other group, something positive, and say it in public in the next meeting. So they did that, and they started to work gradually on things. So sometimes it's just to find modest beginnings about what we have is common feature with people that we think, oh, we cannot live with these guys. No, we can live with any kind of people.
So most of the time I'm thinking that there is so many dialogue platforms that we are participating, but why the case is going worse and worse? Because I think that there is absence of concrete action plan. There is so many words, so many ideas, but there is no concrete action plan in reality. And most times there is introducing that there is a conflicts or some divides between the religious or religious leaders. But I came to the opinion that it's not like that. The most important case here is politicization of religions, misuse of the religions under the name of religions. And that is the main problem that we have to focus. In Azerbaijan, there is a phrase, religious separated from the government, but the government is not separated from the religion. This is important, that it's very important. It's obligation of the government sometimes to keep under control some issues.
So I'm conscious we're down to 5 minutes. Maybe I sacrifice the two of you a little bit and just see if there are some questions. You have a short one? Yeah.
Generally, I know that it's very often advocated for us to tolerate other religions. And the idea of toleration is based actually of superiority of my religion. I tolerate that which is inferior. And I know that it's inferior because my religion is true. And I don't know that my religion is true. Religion is based upon belief, not upon knowledge. If we knew which religion is the right one, we would all belong to the same religion. In the end of the days, as Micha told us in Isaiah, we will all belong to one religion because we'll know what it is. The attitude towards other religions must be based actually, really, I agree, Javier, on respect. And I respect your religion as much as you should respect mine. And by respecting your religion, I respect actually my own. Because we both don't know which religion is true or more true. And I respect yours, you respect. If I respect yours, you respect mine, and vice versa. I don't tolerate yours. Yours stands on the same footing as mine.
Okay. Eugene. Okay. Let's try and get this in a microphone because this is being recorded, so that would be good. Sorry, we don't seem, we may have a roving mic, but there is a roving mic. There it is.
Thank you very much. Just two questions, one for the panel. One for the panel, and then the other one for Professor Javier specifically. The first is that from this discussion, we recognize that perhaps there are various levels and various understanding of social cohesion. So for the purposes of religious harmony and what ASEAN is talking about, developmental agenda, perhaps the working group of the G20 might want to consider having an index on social cohesion, working towards an index towards social cohesion in the area of maybe religious harmony and social cohesion towards something more pointed, more specific, working together in unity, in one mind towards the development agenda. Could the task force do that? That's the first question. The second question is to Professor Javier. I appreciate your focus of trying to change the axis or the focus from law to something social and perhaps even human. Let's not just talk about law, but something human. So my question to you is that apart from understanding the human aspect in terms of respect and appreciation, in Asia, my part of the world, we just don't talk about respect, appreciation, we talk about embrace. So my question to you is that perhaps a more overarching concept like human dignity in whatever forms and understanding could be that focal point instead of just a legal jurisprudential focus. Thank you.
So I'm looking at the clock, and I think we have negative 10 seconds. So, but what I recommend is that
I
maybe
can respond very briefly. We will talk later.
Yeah. No. Why don't you take a few seconds now, and we'll work later on the bigger question, the levels of social cohesion. But if you've got a quick response, yeah.
No, to make a short, simple answer to a complex question, I would say we should try to explore, and there are many people trying that, different ways on which